So goals and targets, what I've found, even though everyone says, by the way, like to grow a company, setting aspirational goals, this is how you grow a company. I found that that's not reality. Here's the side effect that I find of goals and targets. This is the problem-solving muscle that we really need to build back, that goal-driven organizations have lost. So the puzzle solving involves asking 3 questions. The first question is, how well did it work? And notice, this is not a binary question of did you or didn't you hit the target. It's inviting the good and the bad by asking, how well did it work? So there's a quote that I came across recently, which I think is so beautiful. The quote goes, "We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience."
Bună ziua și bine v-am găsit pe startup.ro, unde astăzi vom discuta despre cum să dezvoltăm produse digitale în epoca aceasta a AI-ului, cumva înainte de o conferință care va discuta acest subiect pe larg, și anume PRAU Conference 2025, 24 octombrie la Timișoara. Și am alături de mine pe Radhika Dutt, care este speaker la PRAU Conference, autoare a cărții Radical Product Thinking, The New Mindset for Innovating Smarter, iar această conversație va fi în engleză, așa că voi face un switch. I am switching to English. Hi Radhika, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. First of all, starting, it's your second year at PRAU Conference. You have been a speaker last year. Tell us just a bit about your workshop at the conference. What's the direction you will be taking this year?
Yeah. So I'm excited for the second year at PRAU. First of all, I loved the conference last year. And what I loved about it was also the feeling of community, just so many great conversations with people. And I'm excited to see people back. It really felt, I'm still in touch with so many of those
Yeah.
people that I met, which is really wonderful. It doesn't happen always in conferences. So that was wonderful. In terms of the workshop and my talk, the workshop I'm super excited about as well, because not only are we going to cover radical product thinking and get hands-on time with a lot of the exercises from radical product thinking, but I'm also going to be introducing a sneak preview to my upcoming book. So the next book that I'm working on is about why goals, targets, and OKRs don't work and what actually does. So we'll engage with exercises on that.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear that, and for the people at PRAU to find out more. But because I want this talk to be one that it's applied. When talking about product and product development, we cannot be too general. But you mentioned the 3 things that don't work that you will be covering in your next book. Why they don't work?
So goals and targets, what I've found, even though everyone says, by the way, like to grow a company, setting aspirational goals, this is how you grow a company. I found that that's not reality. Here's the side effect that I find of goals and targets. When you set a target for someone in your company, their incentive is to show you, ta-da, I've hit the target, right? That incentive is to look at the good numbers and prove to you that whatever initiative it is, etc., that it's working, that here are the positive results. But even when it's not malicious, you're not trying to do this on purpose, what happens, even at a subconscious level, is you're looking for the positive numbers so that you can show progress. And what's actually happening is those bad numbers, you're sort of just overlooking them or sweeping them under the rug. And that is a real problem, because when you're building products, it's those bad numbers that actually tell you what's going on. So when you're a leader in the company, you need the team to look at those bad numbers and say, I wonder what just happened there. Is it a problem? Is it an opportunity? They need to play detective and have this muscle for solving that puzzle of what just happened and what can I do? What should I do about it? Right. And as a
Mhm.
leader, you need this from your trenches, from your front lines. And instead, setting goals and targets gets you the information that people think you want to hear, not the reality on the ground.
So if you get these positive numbers from this bunch of numbers, some good, some bad, you may have almost false hypothesis to grow further because you are basing your product on these numbers that are great, but you don't know
Exactly. Yeah,
the
exactly. And so let me share an example of how this
yeah.
actually happened in my career, right? So I was working in a company called Avid Technology, and Avid at the time uh, dominated video editing in the movie business. So every single movie in Hollywood was edited using Avid, every Oscar nominated movie, etc., edited on Avid, right? And we had set goals and targets for our video editors. And in that division, we were hitting those targets. And the numbers, if you just looked at the numbers, it looked like that business was healthy, doing well, etc. But if you really dissected what was happening, the reality is Apple and Adobe, they were eroding the low end. They were also hitting the mid tier. And the way Avid was achieving its numbers was going further and further up into the high end of movie editing. Right? And so the reality is it worked until it didn't work anymore. What we should have done was we should have set the puzzle. We should have asked, huh, we are seeing that we're losing these deals on the low end, we're losing deals on the mid end. And it's those super high end deals that we're having to double down on. The puzzle is when our video editing business is getting commoditized, what should we do? How should this business evolve? And the right answer, if we had looked at it, was kind of like Intel and their memory chip business, when they said, you know what, this business is dying, and they killed it off.
Mhm.
We should have killed off the video editing business because there was a growing part of Avid, which was Avid Broadcast. We should have not invested in editors anymore. It was a huge sink. We should have sort of shifted in our business.
So basically you based your the evolution of the product on this uh, good numbers on the video editing on the corporate side, the big studios. um Maybe it's something like, uh, if we say the bad numbers in a product, we might be faced with the difficult decision to, I don't know, shut down a division or focus on an entire different product that we're developing. Maybe this is a fear inside the organization.
But though that's a pretty extreme example that you would say, you know what, it's getting
Mhm,
commoditized. Let's switch
mhm,
altogether and pivot, right? There are also much smaller changes that you make. I'll give you an example of a company that I've been working with for
mhm,
a couple of years now. The puzzle that were looking at in terms of why aren't we growing? Why have sales stalled? Right? That was the puzzle. And the answer to that puzzle wasn't about shutting down what we were doing. On the contrary, it was figuring out how would we expand from this early adopter to the kind of user who's not using our product today. It turned out that our product was really targeting people who are tech savvy, and we needed to figure out how to address the needs of people who hated computers. And so by figuring out this shift, right, by changing a lot of things within our product in terms of fitting the mental model of those users, we were able to double growth year over year, going from stalled growth, right? And so this is not necessarily to kill your product. In fact, it's
yeah.
to really focus on growth in a way that goals and targets were never achieving that sort of growth.
And as a leader of a company, as a product manager, how do you basically put the skills into people, the skills of finding and communicating the problematic numbers, those that don't look right in the boardroom, and basically develop the product from there?
Yeah. So the answer lies in communicating the puzzle and then giving your team scaffolding for solving the puzzle. So let's talk about an example. And when you
Mhm.
come to Prow, you'll see more real life examples. But
Yeah.
in the meanwhile, right, here is a sales based example. So let's say you're a leader and you want to grow the company. The puzzle you would set. So instead of setting a target saying, reach X million by the end of the year for sales targets, the puzzle you could set is, we want to get to X million, but I see a problem, right? That sales were growing in the last 3 years and sales have stalled. What is going on? Maybe it is that competitors have done something and we've fallen behind. Maybe it is that our messaging was resonating in sales for the early adopters, but the mass market doesn't care about this message. Or maybe it is that our product was really great for that early adopter, but we haven't figured out how to meet the needs of the mass market. So these are a few questions that I genuinely don't know the answer to as a leader. And I
Mhm.
invite feedback from other parts of the organization and we define the puzzle. And so the puzzle, the objective is, how do I get back to this growth trajectory by solving this problem statement, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Once
Mhm.
you've set the puzzle, now I have to solve the puzzle. And this is where, to your question, how do you build this muscle in your team? This is the problem solving muscle that we really need to build back, that goal driven organizations have lost. So, the puzzle solving involves asking 3 questions. The first question is, how well did it work? And notice this is not a binary question of did you or didn't you hit the target. It's inviting the good and the bad by asking, how well did it work? Then the second question is, what did we learn? And this is where I say to teams, don't just give me a long list of statistics and data. I really want to know, what have you figured out from the data? What is happening? And then comes the third question. So, based on how well it worked and what have you learned, the third question is, what will you try next? So, if I were to give you a magic wand, what would you ask for? Right. And
Mhm.
so, in the sales example, let's say, I've decided that my hypothesis is that our messaging isn't resonating. So, in terms of how well it's working, what I'll try is I might say, okay, I've tried out this new messaging to see if it resonates with the mass market. In terms of how well is it working, I'd look at all the data and the results, and aha, looks like this messaging is working better. I am getting the meetings with decision makers. So then the next question is, what have I learned? So I'm having these meetings with decision makers, but what am I finding? I found that, it turns out that in the mass market, it's not just this decision maker, but there's another group within the organization in mass markets where this part of the organization also needs to be bought in. It's not just the decision maker. And sales aren't closing because we need to bring this group on board. Next question. What will I try next? And this is where, based on how well it's working and what I've learned, maybe what I'll try next is, we've never tried targeting this group that also needs to be bought in. Maybe it's a webinar to also include this group and be able to sell to them directly. Or maybe it is material that I give to the decision maker and they can easily forward it on to this other group. And now I'm going to repeat the cycle of how well is it working? What have I learned? What will I try next? Sometimes, by the way, I discover that I was so wrong about the whole puzzle that it makes me go all the way back and say, you know what? I was wrong about the puzzle. The puzzle isn't about the sales and how well early adopters versus decision makers are hearing my message. Maybe it is altogether different that, selling to this mass market requires blah, blah, blah. Right. Um, so this is how we can do puzzle setting and puzzle solving and build this muscle as a leader.
Mhm. Um, I will not insist on this, because I will let you take the stage on at Prow and talk with the people, on the stage and of course afterwards. But I want to go to another subject, a subject that somehow intrigues me right now. Of course, every single aspect of our life, of our products, are changed somehow, for good or for worse, by AI today. And we are also learning about or reading about how AI changes product management. It's the role of the product manager changes. Everyone is pushing for vibe coding and micro SaaS, other trends. I have just thrown trends right now. How do you see the impact of AI in the product management area ecosystem?
Yeah, I love this question. And there are two things that I see. You
Mhm.
mentioned vibe coding, right? One of the things that I see changing with AI is it's going to be so much faster to release features. So, anytime any customer says, oh, can you add this feature? Vibe coding is going to make it this easy. Oh, yeah, sure. Let's do this, right? And you throw in a new feature. And what it's also going to do, and this is the second piece, if you have a mindset that I'm chasing numbers and optimizing for numbers, AI continuously makes it really easy for you to chase those numbers, whether it's through building new features or it's using AI to optimize the user experience for, more clicks or whatever number you're trying to optimize. You can use AI to optimize for content clicks or UI clicks, whatever it is, right? But here's the problem. The way it's shaping roles is if AI is so good at optimizing numbers, and if you as a product person, if in business, your focus is just on optimizing numbers, then it begs the question, well, why do I need you? Right? Why do I need you to optimize numbers when AI can do it so much better than you?
Mhm.
And that is, I think, the key to how our roles are shifting. What makes us really differentiated, right? What makes you add value over AI is your ability to truly empathize with the user, to sense, experiment, learn, and adapt. And
Mhm.
that sensing, experimenting, learning, adapting, this is what I call the Jedi approach versus the stormtrooper approach, right? Where stormtroopers are just chasing numbers and like they're firing everywhere, but not
Mhm.
hitting anything that matters. And so, what this AI era requires us to do is there's less of a need for stormtroopers because AI is going to be the super stormtrooper. So the question for you is, how can you build this muscle for experimentation, learning, and adaptation? How do you differentiate yourself? Don't abdicate that differentiation to AI. And that's where puzzle setting and puzzle solving comes in.
So basically, if we take the example of three companies that are crunching numbers, as you said, using AI, and AI is very good and at understanding numbers and giving some tips, conclusions from these numbers. You will have basically maybe the same decisions. So what's essential there is that are those skills that you mentioned, the human skills, the skills of a product manager, of a good product manager, to understand and sense the market, the shifts, maybe intuition in some sense, no?
There is intuition too. I think as humans, there is intuition. But I think, a lot of businesses, when you talk about intuition, that angle is really scary. Because if you're someone who is, for scary for two reasons. One is, if you're someone who is junior, who doesn't have the skills, knowledge, or experience, the intuition you have, is not based on that much experience. And if you are someone who is senior, you might have intuition, but sometimes you're wrong as well, right? And the thing is, like, what is scary about intuition is people often use that as a weapon. Well, I have this intuition and a gut feeling that this is the right thing to do, so forget your data, and which is why we've gone to this approach of being so data driven. But one thing I will say is I think we need to use both data as well as that sensing, learning, and adapting, right? And so this helps bring in that balance of intuition plus that sensing and learning and adaptation by creating the scaffolding, by having this collaborative discussion of how well is it working? What have we learned? What are we going to try next? Because you're not just relying on your own intuition and making these unilateral decisions. You can have more of collaborative discussions. You're pooling everyone else's lenses too. And this is what works really well.
And talking about the change of the role of the product manager, maybe not talking about the senior ones that can have all these skills and experience. I am curious, how do you see the developing of aspiring product managers in this new environment? As you mentioned, it's not enough just to crunch the numbers. um, so how do you evolve if you are an aspiring product manager right now?
Yeah. So there's a quote that I came across recently, which I think is so beautiful. The quote goes, "We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." Isn't that so powerful? We learn from reflecting on experience. And this is the piece that we rarely ever have time for, you know? So when you use this approach of how well is it working? What have I learned? What will I try next? In thinking through the answers to those three questions, you're really reflecting. And this is how you learn from those experiences, from those experiments, right? The second piece of this is, as a leader, it's very often the focus is just on performance evaluation because this is what we've been taught. And this focus on performance evaluation is always on quantifying performance. I want to know that you're a 5, versus this other person is a 3, and by putting these numbers on you, I constantly know exactly how you're performing. But the focus is less on developing that performance. And so what I found is that as a leader, when I use the scaffolding with my team to say, tell me, as you're solving this puzzle, first of all, I communicate this puzzle. And as you're solving this puzzle, you give me the answers to how you're thinking about it in terms of how well is it working? What have you learned? What will you try next? When you share with me how well it's working, what have you learned? I'm able to see the depth of your thinking. So, based on wherever you are in terms of your skills, knowledge, and experience, I know exactly how much handholding to give you, right? And so, sometimes I'm able to see that someone needs to think a little deeper about the what have you learned from these numbers. I'm able to challenge those numbers, but be able to do so by having more information about how you're thinking about it. When someone says, here's what I want to try next, I'm able to give instant feedback and say, oh, that's a huge risk what you just want to try because that could affect our brand. What if you try this smaller risk instead? That would be a better approach. And so, as a leader, when you use this with your team, you can really develop their performance because you're giving them the scaffolding. And over time, as they build the skills, knowledge, and experience, and you're able to see they're really doing well at puzzle solving, now I can throw them bigger puzzles. Go forth, solve this next, right? That's what you want as a leader.
I like this idea of throwing bigger puzzles at people as a leader. And just a parenthesis right now, a break from our talk. How do you use AI in your work right now? What kind of experiments have fascinated you in your own work?
Mm. Um, what I have tried is, since I'm working on this next book,
Mhm.
sometimes I need ideas for how do I phrase this better. So I'm trying to finish a sentence, and if I'm stuck, I'll enter whatever half sentence or this crappy sentence I'm not happy with, and I'll say, "Can you rewrite this?" And generally, I hate the response. And I feel like it's very AI like, but it might just give me one word that unblocks me, and then I'm able to rewrite it. So this is how I've been using it.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, that's a good one, of basically taking one word, one idea from there, and unlocking what you have locked until then. So
Oh, sorry, one
yeah,
thing I want to add to what you said is what I have not found it good for is creativity. One thing about radical product thinking and all the examples that I use in radical product thinking, they were fresh examples where I don't just use, the recycled things that you keep hearing about in Silicon Valley, the examples of Netflix and Airbnb and it's just
yeah,
everyone is so tired of those same examples, right? And even in writing this next book, I want to have fresh examples that people haven't necessarily thought about or heard about. And so when one thing that doesn't work with AI is that it's really not good at giving you anything fresh. It really just recycles things that are popular. So, from a creativity angle, this is again your differentiation against AI.
yeah. And because you mentioned those classic examples that people give, that you can take from talking with the AI, why why do you need basically better examples than those that people are hearing all over again, the Netflixes of the world, the Airbnbs of the world, those great success stories that maybe are so far away from a startup that is starting right now?
The answer to this lies in our humanity. I feel like as people, we really need to connect with other people. And I feel like these Netflix, Airbnb, and all these Silicon Valley examples, we're tired of them for two reasons. One, because we've heard them so often that the next time someone starts their example by talking about these, you go like, oh, you sort of just tune out. But the second reason is that I care about talking to people around the world. I don't just want to talk to US audiences. I find that a lot of the Silicon Valley thinking is extremely short term thinking. It's very short term focused in terms of, and individualistic, honestly. It's all about, I want to drive growth for myself, and whatever happens to society, well, good luck and God bless. Um, I think that that is not a valid way of looking at our products, and I don't buy into or subscribe to that philosophy. I think we're responsible for the change we create in the world through our products, and that requires taking responsibility for what we build. That requires a thoughtful approach, that requires reflection. And so, if we wanted, and by the way, none of this means that we have to be
Yeah.
altruistic, that we can't make money. We can be a profitable business while also being thoughtful. And if we want to take such an approach, we need to share examples that will resonate with people, that shows that yes, we can take this approach. And so this is why I want to share examples from around the world, where either they're focusing on great culture or solving puzzles in ways that not just benefit
Yeah.
the company, but also they create a positive outcome for society. There are examples like that out there.
Yeah, and I think this is so important because I've seen founders. I've talked to founders that maybe are struggling to find their identity because maybe they are looking at examples that are not resembling them. I cannot be like that founder. I cannot be like those because those were, as you mentioned, it was not an altruistic approach. So I cannot be like that. I cannot grow my company, but they can. They can. There are other examples, of course. But going further to basically for startups that are starting right now, one of the questions that have risen while talking with founders is, uh, who should take the role of a product manager in a startup with multiple founders, none of which has some experience in product developing.
Hmm. Um, so if you have multiple founders, um, I've been in this situation. There's typically one person or there's typically someone in the team. By the way, if you have more than
Yeah.
like 3 founders, it is very hard to operate all together and coordinate anyway. But let's
Yeah.
say between 3 people, someone taking care of operations and sales, someone thinking about the technology and engineering, and one person thinking about, how am I going to build this product and also raise funding. So those are sort of the 3 things, or you split it into 2, which is the product and fundraising side, and the other person managing all of the technology, right? So this is how I've typically operated in startups. And what I will say is, if who should take this, it has to be someone who truly has a passion for building a product, who doesn't have the hubris of the entrepreneur who says, I know all the answers. This is the answer to how we build something. This, I know exactly what customers need. Who is outgoing enough where they genuinely have curiosity and they're talking to their users to truly understand those needs, and being able to shape what that means in terms of what they build in the product. That's how I would think about it. This goes back to your previous question when you were saying, as a founder, very often, like, maybe it doesn't resonate for you what is expected. Like this whole model of a founder who is arrogant, has hubris, feels like I know all the answers. But if you feel like that doesn't resonate for you, that is a good thing. It really is. I like working with founders like that.
Yeah, and that's a good conclusion to our talk, Radhika. Thank you so much for giving us some insight in your next book, in your talk, and also in this future and present with AI.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you for the insightful questions.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching this conversation. And of course, we're going to see every one of you on the 24th in Timișoara at Prau. You can go to the website, reserve some tickets, have the opportunity to talk with Radhika then. Thank you so much, and see ya.